and share with your followers. Welcome back. So tonight we have a two-in-one show for you. We start with a quick tribute to former First Lady Theresa Kufuor, the wife of former President John Agyekum Kufuor. And the announcement came on the very, very wee hours of the morning of today. The incident happened last night. We are told she was surrounded by family. We're speaking to the CEO of the John Kufuor Foundation, Professor Bafo Agyemandia, for some quick thoughts on her work and her legacy. We'll also do some quick reflections with an MP who knew JH Mensa very well, JH Mensa. He spoke to us earlier in the day about JH Mensa, the longest serving mayor of Accra, the longest serving sports minister of Ghana, and a long-term MP for Ningo Pram Pram. I have in studio Samuel Nate George. We'll be talking to him about the demonstration tomorrow as well. But let's start with Professor Bafo Agyemandia. Prof, thanks for joining us. Good evening and commiserations.
Well, thanks for having me, and thanks for the kind words about the sad event that occurred some hours ago. I'm in the US and the news hit me like a piece of brick, even though we know that Madam Theresa has not been unwell for some years now. But I guess yesterday was the good Lord chose for her to perhaps depart this planet. So we thank God for whatever that he does. Thanks for having me.
I guess the first question will be, how is the old man taking all of this? Because, you know, former President Kufuor is dear to many Ghanaians. He's not a young man himself. And Theresa, he's been with for many, many years. From the perspective of the Kufuor Foundation, how is he taking this? How is he recovering from the news?
Well, as you know, as I said, I'm speaking to you from Ohio in the USA, so I haven't seen him personally. But when the news broke yesterday, I called him and had a very interesting discussions and wishing him condolences and all other things. But from the tone of his voice, I think he's quite strong in this adversity. I think he's determined to ensure that the preparation for this event proceeds very well. And I think he has the support that he needs to do that. So I'm sure emotionally, certainly if such an event happens initially, he will be a little bit disabled. But I think after the initial shock, the former president is quite strong and firm. And I'm sure he's all right.
All right. Now, what kind of woman was Madame Theresa Kufuor? I'm asking this for you to put on your political hat as a political scientist. You've written a lot about leaders. You studied Rawlings, his wife. You know Kufuor quite well. If you do the analysis of first ladies, what kind of typology would she be?
Very interesting question, Ben. I think people who followed Madam Theresa during those 8 years, she was the first lady of our republic. There are kinds of interesting observations that we learned. First of all, as you can tell, she's always very cool, very reserved, and very, serious in terms of looks and all. So there were some observations made some years back by people who thought that perhaps she was an unwilling first lady. But that's not the case at all. If you read the autobiography of the former president, written by my good friend Ivo, we discovered that Madam Theresa has been the pillar in the long career life of the president. The president indeed has a very long journey until he attained his ambition of becoming president of the country. And during that long journey, it was Theresa who stayed home to ensure that the 5 children that they had were catered for and were given what a home should provide for children. So in that respect, she was more of a mother in the house, ensuring the well-being of her 5 children, as President Kufuor was journeying through the years that he took to become president. And when he became president, clearly, Madam Theresa remained the bulwark of President's, his stay in office. Certainly, he was not the loud person. He was not one who was always raising issues, but at the background, I think she provided the support that a president would need to be able to fulfill his mandate. And I think she did it very well. In public, you can observe the woman, always her demeanor was one of grace and respect, very calm, but quite alert to her role as the First Lady. As I say, if you put her in the context of First Ladies that we have had, certainly, most people might think she was perhaps, to use the popular word, the coolest, in terms of not needlessly making pronouncements or interfering in the work of her husband. But as I said, she provided the moral and spiritual support that the man needed to perform as a president. So in that respect, I think she was quite pivotal in the success of former President Kufuor when he was in office.
Which is interesting because we do know that she is sister to JH Mensa, who himself is a political colossus in Ghana. So it's a bit of antithetical to have, of course, we are not saying JH Mensa's family is a political family, but to have such a pioneering political economist as your brother, and then to be married to a lawyer who then becomes president, clearly she's aware of politics. So maybe her choice to be quiet was born more out of knowledge of the terrain than fear of the same.
Yes, certainly she was the brother of the colossus, one of the Ghanaian political colossus, JH Mensa. And JH Mensa himself, like Kufuor, struggled for years before they were able to achieve success to get into government. But as I've said, I think Madam Theresa respected her role as a mother first and foremost, especially when it was essential for someone to be home to cater for the 5 children that they had. And I do not believe in any way that her sibling relationship with JH Mensa had any role at all in the kinds of roles that JH Mensa played in Ghanaian politics. When the president became president in 2001, JH Mensa was made a senior minister, the first time such a designation was given in our politics. And rightly so, because the man was a little bit elderly. He struggled since Nkrumah's time, first working for Nkrumah himself before, I guess, getting to the opposition, being in exile and all kinds of stuff. So JH Mensa deserved that. But in terms of his relationship with the president, I do not discover any moment where that relationship influenced the critical decisions that the president had to make. So I think they played it very well. Theresa played it very well. Her brother played it very well. And of course, President Kufuor himself, knowing who he is, certainly played his role very well.
My final thought, if you did a book on a champong as well, so you know a bit about presidents. His wife, we are told, is Faustina. And then, of course, you did a book on Rawlings. His wife, Nana Kunedu. You haven't done your Kufuor book yet. But are you able to do an effectiveness ranking of first ladies? Or is that really an exercise in futility? Because I'm using Nana Kunedu as 19 years, wife of this very enigmatic man, and she herself was no shrinking violet, right? And then you have Achampong as well, who you know a bit more about. So where does she place in the pantheon of first ladies, if there's anything like that?
Ben, that's another very interesting question. But in these matters, at times it's a little bit tricky to try to compare apples and oranges. Individuals have their own characters. Some like to play up or hype up the role of First Lady. Others simply do not want to do that. And those who want to do that, I think that's what they want, and there's nothing wrong with that. But if you look at Madam Theresa, I think her role was quite simply a subdued kind of role that he played, always by the husband's side, whenever it was necessary, out of official functions. Otherwise, she was running her NGO for mother and child care that she set up. She wasn't ambitious to set up anything to project herself. Nothing of that sort was ever detected in her. But once she left office, I think the woman simply fell back to the traditional role of a very good wife, taking care of the house and managing her own business. So I think that in that respect, as I said earlier, some people even want to speculate that perhaps she was the unwilling First Lady. Then that's not the case. It's just her demeanor, her attitude, everything was just motherly. I remember two stories I can tell. When the president first took me home to introduce me to Madam Theresa, when he appointed me as the CEO for the foundation, she shook hands with me. I know what she told me. He said, young man, what is important for you is to make sure you take care of your health. Make sure you eat good food, mind your diet, don't drink much, and that kind of advice. And I was surprised by that. I was surprised by that. And of course, I got to know she is a nurse or was a nurse and midwife. So she's very much on top of health issues. And that was the advice he gave me. And I remember that still today. Then also another story I can tell about her, which I did record in the book that you cited, the Champion's book. You know, Kufuor was first in government in 69 to 72 under the Buzial government. And when the government was overthrown in 72, January, Madam Theresa was pregnant with the last child that he had with the president. And the president was jailed or incarcerated for about 15 months or so. So when the baby was born, the president was still in jail. And Madam Theresa took this little baby to Ashford to meet and introduce the newborn to her husband. Another very touching story. So I think she went through a lot of things.
Wow. May she rest in peace, and commiserations to all concerned. And thank you for talking to us, Prof.
It's my pleasure. All the best.
Wonderful. So that was Professor Bafo Agyeman-Duah, who is a political scientist, but he's also the CEO of the John Agyekum Kufuor Foundation. Well,